The dinner rush at Bellini's was in full swing when my father's booming voice cut through the clinking of silverware and murmur of conversations. "She'll never amount to anything more than this," he announced to his business associates, gesturing toward me as I approached their table with a tray of drinks. 26 years old and still serving tables. A complete waste of potential. I froze, the weight of the tray suddenly feeling like 1,000 pounds. The restaurant seemed to go silent, though I knew it was just the blood rushing to my ears. My father, Vincent Russo, sat at his regular corner table, the best in the house, surrounded by his usual entourage of investors and his executive chef, Marco. Marco, my father's protégé and favorite employee, smirked at me from across the table. At 35, he'd been handed everything by my father: culinary school in Italy, executive position at my father's hotel chain's restaurants, and now the head chef position at Bellini's, the flagship restaurant. A position I had once dreamed of. "Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your drinks." "Ah, Sophia," he replied, not bothering to lower his voice. "I was just explaining to my associates why I couldn't possibly consider you for the management position. No business sense. Just like your mother." The mention of my mother sent a jolt through me. She'd left when I was 12, unable to bear my father's controlling nature and constant belittlement any longer. The last thing she told me was to never let him determine my worth. Marco reached for his whiskey, his gold watch, a gift from my father, catching the light. "Vincent, be fair. Sophia is an excellent waitress. Some people are just meant to serve, not lead." Their laughter felt like acid on my skin as I placed their drinks down with mechanical precision. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted at the bar. A customer was arguing with the bartender, his voice rising with each second. "Is there a manager here? Anyone competent running this place?" the man demanded. The floor manager was nowhere to be seen, having stepped out earlier with some excuse. I glanced at my father, who was deliberately looking away, while Marco sipped his drink with amusement dancing in his eyes. I straightened my shoulders and approached the irate customer. "Sir, I'd be happy to help resolve this issue. The bill says I ordered the premium bourbon, but I specifically asked for the house whiskey. I'm not paying an extra $20 for something I didn't order." Behind me, I heard my father scoff. "This should be entertaining." I ignored him and focused on the customer. "Sir, I completely understand your frustration. Let me fix this immediately." I took the check, corrected the error, and added a complimentary dessert to apologize for the mistake. "Thank you," the man said, tension leaving his shoulders. "Nice to see someone here knows how to handle a situation." As I returned to my other tables, I caught Marco whispering something to my father that made them both chuckle while looking in my direction. The humiliation burned in my chest, but something else was burning even hotter: resolve. Later that night, as I counted my tips in the break room, Marco entered. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me with that same smug expression. "Your father means well, Sophia. He just understands your limitations better than you do." I looked up at him, really looked at him, the man who'd been given every opportunity I'd been denied. "Do you ever wonder, Marco, if you'd be where you are if my father hadn't handed everything to you?" His smile faltered. "I earned my position." "Did you?" "'Cause I've seen the books. I've seen the customer complaints. I've seen how the restaurant performs when you're in charge versus when you're not." Marco's face darkened. "Careful, Sophia. You're just a waitress. Remember your place." As he stalked out, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The business school I'd been secretly attending for the past 3 years had just posted final grades. I'd graduated summa cum laude with my MBA, the degree my father had refused to pay for, forcing me to work double shifts to cover tuition. I looked around the break room, at the schedule where I'd worked every holiday for years to accommodate others, at the employee handbook I knew better than the manager himself, at the notes I'd been taking for years about every aspect of the restaurant's operations. "Just a waitress," I whispered to myself, a slow smile spreading across my face. "We'll see about that." The following morning, I sat at my small kitchen table in my studio apartment, surrounded by papers. 3 years of business school notes, restaurant profit and loss statements I'd secretly copied, and customer feedback forms were spread out before me. My roommate Zoe emerged from her bedroom, her nurse's scrubs already on for her early shift. "What's all this?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Research," I replied, not looking up from the financial statements. "This about what happened with your dad last night? You came home looking like you were ready to set something on fire." I finally looked up. "Did you know Bellini's has been operating at a loss for the past 2 quarters? The only thing keeping it afloat is my father's other businesses." Zoe sat across from me. "And how exactly do you know that?" "I've been tracking everything. The restaurant's performance, customer satisfaction, staff turnover, everything." Zoe's eyes widened. "This is about more than just what your dad said, isn't it? This has been brewing for a while." I nodded slowly. "My whole life, he's told me I'd never amount to anything more than a waitress. When Mom left, he convinced me it was because I wasn't worth staying for. When I wanted to go to culinary school, he said I lacked creativity. When I wanted to study business, he said I didn't have the mind for it." "But you went anyway," Zoe pointed out. "Yes, and now I have an MBA he doesn't know about, and something else he doesn't know." I pulled out a separate folder and slid it across the table. Zoe opened it and gasped. "Is this what I think it is? My mother's trust fund. The one my father told me she'd empty before abandoning us. Turns out, she left it untouched for me to access when I turned 25. That was last year. You've had access to this money for a year and never used it." I shook my head. "I needed a plan first. I needed to be sure." Zoe leafed through the documents. "Sophia, this is a lot of money. Enough to buy a failing restaurant," I confirmed. "But there's more." I handed her another document. "I've been in contact with Leonard Kwan." "The investor? The one who's always at your father's table?" "Yes. He's been increasingly concerned about my father's business decisions, particularly regarding Bellini's. He thinks my father is too emotionally attached to the restaurant and to Marco to see the problems." "And what does Leonard think of you?" I smiled. "He has no idea I'm Vincent's daughter. I've been emailing him under my mother's maiden name for months, presenting my analysis of Bellini's operations and my ideas for turning it around." Zoe's jaw dropped. "You're plotting a hostile takeover of your father's restaurant." "Not hostile. Strategic." I pointed to another document. "These are the current investors in Bellini's. My father only owns 40%. The rest is divided among 5 other investors, including Leonard, who owns 20%. I only need to convince 2 more to sell their shares." "And you think they will?" "To you." I pulled out customer satisfaction surveys and staff feedback forms I'd collected over the past year. Marco might be my father's golden boy, but the staff hates working with him. Customer complaints about food quality and service have increased 60% since he took over as executive chef. The investors care about their money, not my father's favoritism. Zoe studied me carefully. "What exactly are you planning to do if you get control?" "First, implement the changes the restaurant actually needs. Second, show my father that I'm more than capable of running a successful business." I paused. "And third, fire Marco. Won't your father just rehire him at one of his other restaurants?" "Not after I expose what Marco's really been doing." I pulled out one final folder. "Remember those nights I stayed late to help with inventory? I was actually gathering evidence. Marco's been skimming supplies for his side catering business and billing it to Bellini's." Zoe whistled low. "You've been planning this for a long time. Since the day Marco was promoted over me despite having half my experience." I gathered the papers into organized piles. "My father thinks I'm just a waitress with no business sense. He's about to learn how wrong he is." "What's your timeline for all this?" I checked my watch. "Actually, I have a meeting with Leonard in an hour. If all goes well, phase 1 begins today." As I dressed for the meeting in the one professional outfit I owned, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked different somehow, more determined, more focused. My mother's words echoed in my mind. "Never let him determine your worth." "I won't, Mom," I whispered to my reflection. "Not anymore." Leonard Kwan's office was on the 23rd floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. As his assistant showed me in, I fought to keep my nervousness from showing. This was the first time we'd be meeting in person after months of email correspondence. Leonard rose from behind his desk, extending his hand. He was shorter than I expected, but his presence filled the room. "Miss Catalano," he said, using my mother's maiden name. "A pleasure to finally meet you in person. Mr. Kwan, thank you for taking the time. Your analysis of Bellini's operations was too insightful to ignore." He gestured for me to sit. "Though I admit, I'm curious why someone of your obvious talent is interested in a single struggling restaurant." I prepared for this question. I believe in Bellini's potential. The location is prime, the concept is sound, but the execution is flawed. With the right management, it could be incredibly profitable. Leonard studied me carefully. "And you believe you're the right management?" "I know I am." I opened my portfolio and handed him updated projections. "These numbers reflect my proposed changes, streamlining the menu, adjusting staffing to match demand patterns, and implementing a new marketing strategy targeting younger professionals." He reviewed the documents with practiced efficiency. "Impressive. But acquiring Bellini's won't be easy. Vincent Russo is emotionally attached to that restaurant." "Which is exactly why it's failing," I countered. "Business decisions should be driven by data, not emotion." Leonard smiled slightly. "You sound like me 20 years ago." He leaned back in his chair. "Let's say I'm interested. What exactly are you proposing?" "You currently own 20% of Bellini's. I've secured a commitment from James Whitaker to sell his 15% stake." This wasn't entirely true yet. James had only expressed interest, but Leonard didn't need to know that. "That still leaves you short of controlling interest." I nodded. "This is where you come in. I need your help convincing Patricia Menendez to sell her 10%. Leonard's eyebrows raised. "Patricia and I have had our differences. But she respects you. And more importantly, she wants a return on her investment, which Bellini's hasn't provided in nearly a year." There was a long pause as Leonard seemed to be considering something. Finally he asked, "Why not approach Vincent directly? Offer to buy him out?" The question caught me off guard. I chose my words carefully. "Vincent has a blind spot when it comes to Bellini's. He wouldn't consider selling to an outsider." "And that's what you are? An outsider?" My heart raced. Did he know? To Vincent Russo, yes. Leonard stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Miss Catalano, I've been in business for 30 years. In that time, I've learned to research thoroughly before any meeting." He turned to face me. "Sophia Russo." I felt the blood drain from my face but kept my composure. "So you know that Vincent's daughter wants to buy his restaurant out from under him?" "Yes, I know." His expression wasn't angry but evaluating. "What I don't know is why you didn't tell me." I stood to meet his gaze. "Would you have taken my proposal seriously if you knew I was just a waitress and Vincent's daughter?" To my surprise, Leonard laughed. "Probably not." "A fair point." He returned to his desk. "Now the question becomes, do I help Vincent's daughter teach him a lesson, or do I tell my longtime business associate about his daughter's plans?" "This isn't about teaching him a lesson," I said firmly. "This is about saving a restaurant that's bleeding money because of poor management and nepotism. You've seen my analysis. You know I'm right." Leonard picked up my projections again. "Yes, your analysis is sound. But business isn't just about numbers, Sophia. It's about people. What happens when Vincent discovers what you've done?" "He'll be angry," I admitted. "But eventually, he'll see that I've done what he couldn't. Make Bellini successful again." Leonard studied me for what felt like an eternity. "You know, you remind me of someone. My father." I guess my stomach sinking. "No, your mother." At my shocked expression, he continued, "Isabella was brilliant. She had an instinct for business that Vincent never appreciated. Before she left, she consulted on several of my investments." I struggled to process this information. My mother, who my father had always described as financially irresponsible, had been a business consultant. "She never told me," I whispered. "Vincent made her promise not to. He couldn't handle that his wife had a better head for business than he did." Leonard's expression softened slightly. "When she left, I always wondered what happened to that spark in her. Now I see it didn't disappear. It passed to you." He returned to his seat and pressed the intercom. "Diana, please bring in the Bellini's portfolio." To me, he said, If we're going to do this, we'll do it properly. You're going to help me? Vincent Russo has made many questionable business decisions over the years. Underestimating you might be his biggest one yet. He offered his hand. I'll help you acquire controlling interest in Bellini's on one condition. Name it. When you succeed, and I believe you will, you consider expanding beyond just one restaurant. The industry needs more leaders with your analytical skills and determination. I shook his hand, feeling for the first time that I might actually pull this off. Deal. For the next 2 hours, Leonard and I strategized. He arranged a meeting with Patricia Menendez for the following day and provided insights into her priorities that would help secure her shares. By the time I left his office, we had a solid plan in place. As the elevator descended, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from the restaurant manager. Apparently, my father was looking for me, demanding to know why I hadn't shown up for my shift. I smiled to myself. He was still thinking of me as just a waitress who had missed work. Soon he'd be thinking of me as his boss. 3 weeks after my meeting with Leonard, I sat across from Patricia Menendez at her law firm's conference room, signing the final papers that would transfer her 10% stake in Bellini's to me. With James Whitaker's 15% already secured and Leonard's 20% voting with me, I now effectively controlled 45% of the restaurant, more than my father's 40%. Congratulations, Ms. Russo, Patricia said, sliding the signed documents to her assistant. Though I must say, your father will not be pleased. I'm prepared for that, I replied calmly. Patricia gave me a measured look. Vincent and I have had our disagreements over the years, but we've maintained a professional relationship. I'm selling to you because your business plan makes sense, not because of any personal feelings toward your father. I understand, and I appreciate your professionalism. As we wrapped up the meeting, Patricia offered one final piece of advice. The restaurant business is unforgiving, Sophia. Your father will fight back when he discovers what you've done. Make sure your first moves are decisive. I nodded, thanking her for the warning. Outside the building, I checked my watch. It was 3 p.m., 2 hours before my scheduled shift at Bellini's. For the past 3 weeks, I'd continued working as a waitress, gathering final pieces of information, and maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed. Tonight would be my last shift as a server. My phone rang. Zoe. How did it go? She asked as soon as I answered. Done. I now control 45% of Bellini's. Holy shit, you actually did it. Her excitement was palpable. So what happens now? Now comes the hard part. I need to call an emergency board meeting citing financial concerns. Leonard will back me, which means we'll have enough votes to push it through. And your father? He'll be ambushed, but legally there's nothing he can do. The bylaws are clear. Major shareholders can call emergency meetings with 48 hours notice. When are you planning this showdown? Friday morning, which gives me tonight and tomorrow to finalize everything. I flagged down a taxi. I need to get home and change for my shift. Last time slinging drinks, Zoe noted. How does it feel? I paused, considering. Bittersweet, actually. I've learned a lot in that job, including how not to treat your employees, I bet. Exactly. The taxi pulled up. I've gotta go. I'll fill you in tonight. At home, I changed into my server uniform for what I knew would be the final time. I ran my fingers over the name tag. Sophia. Just my first name like all the other servers. Soon, if everything went according to plan, people would know my full name and recognize what it meant. As I entered Bellini's through the staff entrance, Danny, one of the hostesses, rushed up to me. Your father's here with Marco, she whispered. They've been asking if you've arrived yet. Thanks for the heads up. I squared my shoulders and headed to the main floor. My father and Marco were seated at the usual corner table, deep in conversation. They hadn't noticed me yet, giving me a moment to observe them. Marco was gesturing animatedly while my father nodded, looking pleased. Whatever Marco was proposing, my father was buying it. I approached their table. Good evening, gentlemen. Can I get you something to drink? My father looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to recognition. Ah, Sophia. Finally decided to show up for work, I see. I'm not late, I said evenly. My shift starts at 5. A dedicated employee would arrive early, Marco commented with a smirk. I maintained my professional smile. What can I get you to drink? The usual, my father said dismissively. And tell Thomas the first need to speak with him. Thomas was the floor manager, a position I'd been denied 3 times despite having seniority. Of course. I turned to leave but stopped when my father spoke again. Oh, and Sophia? Marco has some exciting news. He's been offered his own cooking show on the regional food network. The exposure will be excellent for Bellini's. Marco preened. They approached me after seeing my guest spot on Morning Bites last month. Vincent has generously agreed to let them film some segments here. Congratulations, I said, meaning it. A cooking show would keep Marco distracted during the transition I was planning. As I walked away, I overheard my father say, "See what happens when you have real talent and ambition? The world notices." The comment stung, but not as much as it once would have. In less than 48 hours, everything would change. The rest of the shift passed in a surreal haze. I took orders, served food, and smiled at customers with mechanical precision, all while mentally reviewing my plans for Friday's meeting. Occasionally, I'd catch my father watching me with that familiar look of disappointment, or Marco whispering something that made them both laugh in my direction. Let them laugh, I thought. They won't be laughing Friday. Near the end of my shift, I was clearing a table when I overheard a conversation between my father and Marco that made me freeze. Are you sure about closing the restaurant for renovations next month? Marco was asking. The timing seems abrupt. It's necessary, my father replied. The place needs a complete overhaul if we're going to align with your new celebrity chef status. Besides, the staff could use a shakeup. Too many underperformers. Like your daughter? Marco chuckled. My father didn't contradict him. Sophia will land on her feet. Waitressing jobs are always available. They were planning to close the restaurant without warning and likely terminate most of the staff. The very people who had worked tirelessly despite poor management and declining conditions. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Leonard. Need to move meeting to tomorrow morning. Urgent. Will explain. His response came seconds later. Done. 9 a.m. I finished my shift with renewed determination. As I hung up my apron in the break room for what I knew would be the last time, I took a moment to look around at the staff. Maria, who worked double shifts to support her 3 kids. James, who was putting himself through college. Danny, who had been passed over for promotion despite her incredible customer service skills. They deserved better than to be discarded for Marco's ego and my father's poor business decisions. Tomorrow they would get it. The boardroom at Bellini's restaurant group was seldom used. My father preferred making decisions unilaterally rather than consulting the board. This morning, however, the long mahogany table was surrounded by shareholders, legal representatives, and my father, who still had no idea why he'd been summoned. I stood outside the door, taking deep breaths to steady my nerves. Leonard appeared beside me. Are you ready? He asked quietly. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. He nodded toward my outfit, a tailored charcoal suit I'd splurged on for this exact moment. You look the part. Let's hope I can play it. Leonard patted my shoulder reassuringly. Remember, you've earned this. Every bit of it. We entered together. My father was mid-sentence, complaining about the early meeting, when he spotted me walking in with Leonard. Confusion crossed his face, followed quickly by suspicion. Sophia? What are you doing here? This is a shareholders' meeting. Leonard stepped forward. Vincent, I believe you know Sophia Russo, your newest major shareholder. The room fell silent as my father processed this information. What the hell are you talking about? I placed my portfolio on the table and took a seat directly across from him. I now control 45% of Bellini's, Dad, 15% from James Whitaker, 10% from Patricia Menendez, and 20% through a voting alliance with Leonard. My father's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. You? A shareholder? With what money? Mom's trust fund. The one you told me she'd emptied before leaving. I maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. Turns out she left it untouched for me. This is a joke, he sputtered, looking around the room for support. Finding none, he turned to Leonard. You're behind this betrayal? Leonard remained professional. This isn't personal, Vincent. It's business. Bellini's has been underperforming for 2 years. Sophia has presented a compelling turnaround strategy that the other shareholders and I believe in. My father slammed his fist on the table. I built this restaurant from nothing. You think my waitress daughter can run it better than me? MBA, I said calmly. What? I have an MBA, Dad. Summa cum laude from State University's night program. I've been studying business administration for 3 years, while working double shifts at your restaurant. I slid my diploma across the table. I'm not just a waitress. My father glanced at the diploma, then back at me with narrowed eyes. So what's your play here? You think you can force me out? I still own 40%. I don't need to force you out, I explained. With controlling interest, I can implement the changes Bellini's needs to become profitable again. Changes you've been resisting. Leonard nodded to the corporate counsel, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. We've prepared a comprehensive analysis of Bellini's current financial situation and Sophia's proposed turnaround strategy. As the board members reviewed the documents, I walked them through my plan, streamlining the bloated menu to focus on higher margin items, adjusting staffing patterns to match demand, implementing a new marketing strategy targeting younger professionals, and most controversially, restructuring the management team. This is the same nonsense you've been pushing for years, my father interrupted. It didn't make sense then, and it doesn't make sense now. Actually, Patricia Menendez interjected, these proposals align with recommendations I've made in the past that you dismissed, Vincent. My father's face darkened further. You're all being manipulated by a girl who's never run anything more complex than a dinner service. I remained composed. The numbers speak for themselves, Dad. Bellini's has been operating at a loss for 7 consecutive quarters. Customer satisfaction is down 58%. Staff turnover has doubled. These aren't opinions, they're facts. Facts can be interpreted in different ways, he countered. True. Which is why I've brought multiple outside perspectives. I nodded to Leonard, who introduced the restaurant consultant and financial analyst we'd asked to review my proposals. For the next hour, they presented their assessments, validating my analysis and recommendations. With each presentation, my father grew more silent, his initial outrage giving way to a cold, calculating anger I recognized all too well. When the presentations concluded, Leonard called for a vote on my proposed changes. One by one, the shareholders voiced their approval, until only my father remained. Vincent, Leonard prompted. My father stared directly at me. You think this little power play impresses me? You have no idea what you're getting into. Running a restaurant requires more than spreadsheets and fancy degrees. I know, I agreed. It requires understanding every aspect of the operation, from food costs to customer experience to staff management. It requires being on the floor, listening to feedback, and adapting accordingly. It requires exactly the experience I've gained working every position at Bellini's for the past 8 years. While I've been running successful restaurants for 30 years, he shot back. And I've learned from both your successes and mistakes. I softened my tone slightly. Dad, this isn't about humiliating you. It's about saving Bellini's and the livelihoods of everyone who works there. My father's jaw tightened. Including your own. Yes, I acknowledged. Including my own. After a long tense moment, he spoke again. I abstained from the vote. But know this, when your little experiment fails, don't come crying to me to fix it. Leonard officially recorded the vote, which passed despite my father's abstention. Effective immediately, Sophia Russo is appointed as Chief Executive Officer of Bellini's Restaurant Group, with full authority to implement the approved changes. As the meeting adjourned, my father stood abruptly. You'll regret this day, Sophia. You're not ready for this position, and everyone here will see that soon enough. He stormed out without another word, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Leonard approached me. That went about as well as could be expected. Are you ready for phase 2? I nodded, gathering my materials. He'll call Marco immediately. I need to get to the restaurant before he does. Do you want me to come with you? I considered this for a moment, then shook my head. No. This part one need to do alone. As I walked out of the boardroom, now officially the CEO of Bellini's, the weight of what I'd just done hit me. I'd outmaneuvered my father and gained control of his beloved restaurant. But the hard part was just beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Well? I typed back. It's done. I'm heading to restaurant now for phase 2. Her response was immediate. Holy shit. Want backup? Not yet, I replied. But stay by your phone. I drove to Bellini's, mentally preparing for the confrontation to come. The restaurant wouldn't open for lunch service for another 3 hours, but the prep staff would already be there, including Marco, who always arrived early to check deliveries. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Marco's red sports car, another gift from my father. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my suit jacket and walked through the front door. The hostess station was empty, but I could hear activity from the kitchen. I moved through the dining room with newfound authority, no longer a waitress but the owner and CEO. When I pushed through the kitchen doors, the staff looked up in surprise. Marco was at the center island, reviewing the day's specials with the line cooks. Sophia, he said, confusion evident in his voice. You're not scheduled until dinner. Schedule change, I replied calmly. We need to talk, Marco. In private. He smirked. I'm a little busy running a restaurant right now. I held his gaze steadily. My restaurant. As of this morning, I own controlling interest in Bellini's and have been appointed CEO by the board. The kitchen fell silent. Marco's smirk froze, then slowly faded. Very funny. I pulled out the board resolution and handed it to him. Not a joke. As he scanned the document, his face cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally anger. This is bullshit. Vincent would never allow this. He didn't have a choice. It was a legal transaction and board vote. I turned to the staff, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes. Everyone, please continue your prep work. There will be a full staff meeting at 4 p.m. today, where I'll discuss some exciting changes coming to Bellini's. Marco threw the resolution onto the counter. Vincent will reverse this. You have no idea what you're doing. Actually, I do. Which brings me to why I'm here now. I gestured toward the office. Shall we continue this conversation privately, or would you prefer the staff hear everything? Reluctantly, Marco followed me to the small office off the kitchen. As soon as the door closed, he exploded. What kind of game are you playing? You're a waitress, Sophia. You can't run a restaurant. I'm an MBA with 8 years of restaurant experience who's worked every position in this establishment, I corrected him. And my first official act as CEO is to terminate your employment, effective immediately. The color drained from Marco's face. You can't fire me. I'm the executive chef, the face of Bellini's. You're also embezzling from the restaurant, I stated flatly. Using Bellini's suppliers for your private catering business, charging inventory to our accounts, and pocketing the difference. Marco's shock confirmed my accusation. That's ridiculous. I placed another folder on the desk. 6 months of documentation, delivery receipts, inventory discrepancies, witness statements from delivery drivers. Would you like me to continue? He shifted from defense to attack. Vincent won't let this stand. He'll destroy you for this. My father is no longer in control here. I am. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. This is your final paycheck, including 2 weeks severance, which is more generous than you deserve. You have 30 minutes to clear out your personal belongings. Marco stared at me with naked hatred. You're going to regret this. Without me, this place will collapse within a month. I'm willing to take that chance. I opened the office door. 30 minutes, Marco. After that, security will escort you out. As he stormed past me, I called after him. Oh, and Marco? The Regional Food Network has been informed of your financial improprieties. I doubt they'll want a chef with a history of embezzlement representing them on television. His face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, my phone rang. The display showed my father's name. I answered calmly. Hello, Dad. What the hell have you done? He demanded. Marco just called me. I fired an employee who was stealing from the company, I replied. Something you should have done months ago when the evidence first appeared. You've gone too far, Sophia. Marco is essential to Bellini's success. The data suggests otherwise. Food costs are down 15% on days he's not in the kitchen, and customer satisfaction scores are higher. This isn't about data. It's about loyalty. my father shouted. You're right, I agreed. It is about loyalty. Loyalty to this restaurant and the people who work here. Not to someone who's been stealing from us and driving customers away with his ego. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When my father spoke again, his voice was eerily calm. You think you've won. You haven't. This game has just begun, Sophia. This isn't a game to me, Dad. It's my future. And the future of everyone who depends on Bellinis for their livelihood. We'll see about that. The line went dead. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. My father wouldn't give up easily. But neither would I. The next 3 weeks were a blur of 18-hour days, resistance at every turn, and small victories that kept me going. After firing Marco, I promoted Elena, the talented sous chef who had been working in his shadow for years, to interim executive chef. The kitchen staff, freed from Marco's tyrannical management style, rallied behind her immediately. The front-of-house changes were more challenging. Some of the staff who had been loyal to my father were skeptical of my leadership, while others were simply afraid of change. I spent hours with each department, listening to their concerns and incorporating their feedback into my plans. By the end of the first week, we had streamlined the menu, reducing it from 68 items to 30 high-quality, high-margin dishes that showcased Elena's considerable talents. The kitchen ran more efficiently, food costs dropped, and surprisingly, customer satisfaction began to climb. But my father wasn't going quietly. He's been calling our suppliers. Thomas, the floor manager, informed me on Friday afternoon, trying to get them to delay our deliveries or raise our prices. I nodded, unsurprised. Have any of them agreed? A few of the smaller ones, yes, but the major suppliers are sticking with us, especially after you negotiated those new contracts. Good. Keep me posted if anything changes. I reviewed the weekend reservation list. We're fully booked for Saturday night? For the first time in months, Thomas confirmed with a smile. Word's getting out about the changes. Just as I was beginning to feel cautiously optimistic, my phone rang. It was Leonard. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Vincent is meeting with potential investors to buy back shares. My stomach tightened. Can he raise enough capital? Potentially. He's leveraging his other business holdings as collateral. But that's not the immediate concern. He's also spreading rumors about your competence and the restaurant's stability. How bad? Bad enough that Patricia is getting nervous. She's been calling me asking if she made a mistake supporting you. I closed my eyes briefly. What do you need from me? Hard numbers. If you can show concrete improvement after these first weeks, it will go a long way toward reassuring the board. I'll have a full report to you by morning. Make it good, Sophia. Vincent is pulling out all the stops on this one. After hanging up, I called Zoe. How's the restaurant empire? She answered cheerfully. Under siege, I replied. I need a favor. Can you come to the restaurant tonight? I need help compiling data for a report, and I could really use another set of eyes. Of course. I'll bring coffee and snacks. We're pulling an all-nighter, aren't we? Afraid so. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the floor, working alongside the staff during dinner service. The energy in the restaurant had shifted noticeably. Service was more efficient, the food was coming out faster and of higher quality, and customers were responding positively. At 11:30 p.m., after the last customer had left and the closing staff were finishing their duties, Zoe arrived with a tote bag full of energy drinks and snacks. Wow, she said, looking around the empty dining room. It feels different in here. Good different or bad different? Good. It feels lighter somehow. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. Come on, let's get to work. We set up in the office, spreading financial reports, customer feedback cards, and staff evaluations across the desk. For the next several hours, we compiled data comparing the 3 weeks since I'd taken over to the same period last year, and the 3 weeks immediately preceding the change in management. By 3 a.m., the results were clear. Food costs were down 22%. Staff turnover had dropped to 0, customer satisfaction was up 35%, and most importantly, revenue had increased by 18%. These numbers are incredible, Zoe said, staring at our spreadsheet. Especially for just 3 weeks of changes. It's what happens when you have the right people in the right positions, I replied. thinking of Elena in the kitchen and the servers who had blossomed under more supportive management. By dawn, I had completed a comprehensive report for Leonard and the board. After sending it off, Zoe and I collapsed on the small couch in the office, utterly exhausted. I must have dozed off because I woke to the sound of the delivery entrance buzzer. Checking my watch, I saw it was 8 a.m. Time for the morning deliveries. Zoe, I nudged my sleeping friend. I need to check on the deliveries. You should head home and get some real sleep before your shift tonight. She mumbled something incoherent before forcing her eyes open. You should sleep too. Later. There's still work to do. As I walked through the kitchen toward the delivery entrance, I noticed the head chef, Elena, had already arrived and was checking inventory. She looked up as I approached. Boss? You look like you've been here all night. I have been, I admitted, working on a report for the investors. She nodded understanding. I heard about your father trying to undermine you. The staff is talking. What are they saying? Elena smiled. That they're not worried. That for the first time in years, they feel like someone actually cares about this place and them. Her words gave me a second wind just as my phone rang. It was Leonard. The report is excellent, he said immediately. I've shared it with the board, and Patricia is reassured for now. For now. Vincent isn't giving up. He's scheduled a special board meeting for next Friday to discuss urgent concerns about management direction. I sighed. What's his angle? He's claiming your changes are short-sighted and unsustainable, that you're cutting corners to make the numbers look good temporarily. That's ridiculous. We've improved quality across the board. I know that, but he's convincing. He's got Marco backing him up with all sorts of claims about how you're ruining his culinary vision. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. What do we do? Beat him at his own game. The meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. at the corporate office. I suggest we move it to 1 p.m. at Bellini's during lunch service. I caught on immediately. So the board can see the changes firsthand. Exactly. They can taste the food, observe the service, talk to the staff and customers. No amount of Vincent's rhetoric can compete with that kind of direct experience. Can we do that? Change the venue and time. With controlling interest? Absolutely. I'll handle the notifications. You focus on making sure next Friday's lunch service is flawless. After hanging up, I turned to Elena. How do you feel about creating a special tasting menu for the board next Friday? Her eyes lit up. I've been working on some new dishes I think you'll love. Consider it done. For the next week, we prepared meticulously for the board's visit. Every staff member was briefed and given specific responsibilities. Elena perfected her new menu items, and I personally oversaw every detail of the dining room setup. Through it all, I kept waiting for my father's next move. His silence was unsettling. Vincent Russo was never this quiet when plotting something. The night before the board meeting, as I was reviewing the final arrangements in the office, Thomas knocked on the door. You need to see this, he said, handing me his tablet. On the screen was a press release from my father's company announcing the grand opening of Russo's, a new high-end Italian restaurant less than 3 blocks from Bellini's. The executive chef? Marco Santini. When? I asked, scanning the document. 2 weeks from now. They've been setting it up quietly for months, apparently. The timing couldn't be coincidental. My father had been planning to abandon Bellini's all along, planning to open a competing restaurant with Marco and leave this one to fail. That explained his willingness to let the restaurant decline under Marco's mismanagement. I set the tablet down, a strange calm settling over me. Get everyone together. I need to speak to the entire staff tonight. An hour later, I stood before the assembled Bellini's staff. Servers, cooks, bartenders, hosts, dishwashers, everyone. Many looked concerned, having already seen the news about the new restaurant. By now, most of you have heard about Russo's opening nearby. I began. This is my father's attempt to compete directly with us and potentially lure some of you away. Murmurs spread through the group. I won't lie to you. The next few months will be challenging. My father has deep pockets and decades of connections in this industry. He's betting that we'll fail. I paused, looking at each face in the room. But he's overlooking something crucial. While he has money and connections, we have heart. We have talent. We have people who care deeply about making this restaurant exceptional. Elena stepped forward. I've been offered a position at Russo's, double my current salary. My heart sank, but before I could respond, she continued. I turned it down. Because for the first time in my career, I'm working somewhere that values creativity and collaboration over ego and status. I'm staying with Bellini's. One by one, other staff members spoke up, sharing similar stories. My father had approached nearly all of the senior staff with lucrative offers, and every single one had declined. Thomas, the floor manager, summed it up. Vincent never understood that a restaurant is more than a business. It's a family. And you don't abandon family when things get tough. I was moved beyond words. These people, who had every reason to take the safer, more lucrative option, were choosing to stay and fight alongside me. Thank you, I finally managed. Your loyalty means everything. Now let's show the board tomorrow exactly what makes Bellini's special. The next day, as the board members filed into Bellini's for lunch service, I stood ready to greet them with newfound confidence. My father arrived last, his expression darkening when he saw the bustling restaurant filled with satisfied customers. What's this? He demanded. The meeting is supposed to be at the corporate office. Change of plans, Leonard explained smoothly. We thought it would be more productive to see Bellini's in action, while we discuss its management. My father's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the dining room. A clever stunt, but it changes nothing. It's not a stunt, Dad, I said. It's reality. This is what Bellini's has become in just 4 weeks under new management. Leonard guided everyone to the large private dining room where a special table had been arranged. As they were seated, Elena's carefully crafted tasting menu began to arrive, each dish more impressive than the last, showcasing local ingredients and innovative techniques that honored Italian traditions while adding contemporary twists. Throughout the meal, board members commented on the quality of the food and service. Even Patricia Menendez, who had been wavering in her support, seemed impressed. My father ate little, his jaw clenched as he watched the board's positive reactions. When the meal concluded, Leonard called the official meeting to order. Vincent has requested this special session to address concerns about Bellini's current management, Leonard began. Vincent, the floor is yours. My father cleared his throat. I appreciate the theatrical presentation we've just witnessed, but one good lunch service doesn't constitute successful management. Sophia has been making reckless changes without proper consideration for long-term sustainability. Could you be more specific? Patricia asked. She fired our executive chef without having a permanent replacement. She slashed the menu by more than half. She's implementing untested marketing strategies that could alienate our core clientele. I waited until he had finished before responding. I fired an executive chef who was embezzling from the restaurant. I streamlined a bloated menu to focus on quality over quantity. And the marketing strategies I've implemented have already increased our younger customer demographic by 28%, while retaining 95% of our existing clientele. I distributed copies of my latest report, which included not just financial data but customer testimonials and staff feedback. These changes aren't reckless. They're necessary corrections to years of mismanagement. And they're working. I looked directly at my father. Which brings us to the real reason for this meeting. It's not about my management style. It's about Russo's, the competing restaurant Dad is opening 3 blocks away. The board members looked at my father in surprise. You're opening a competing restaurant? Patricia asked incredulously. While still maintaining ownership in Bellini's? My father shifted uncomfortably. My business ventures are my own affair. Not when they constitute a conflict of interest, Leonard pointed out, which, according to the shareholders' agreement, requires full disclosure to the board. I was planning to inform everyone today, my father claimed. After attempting to poach our entire staff, I challenged. After spreading rumors to undermine customer confidence in Bellini's, the board members turned to my father, waiting for his response. For the first time he looked cornered. Business is competitive, he finally said. I'm merely creating a superior alternative to what Bellini's has become under my daughter's amateur management. Patricia shook her head. Vincent, I've known you for 20 years, but this behavior is unacceptable. You're actively trying to sabotage a business you still own significant shares in. I believe this constitutes breach of fiduciary duty, Leonard added. The board should consider requesting Vincent's resignation. My father's face flushed with anger. You can't force me out. I built this restaurant. No one's forcing you out, I said calmly. But you have a choice to make. You can sell your shares in Bellini's and focus on your new venture, or you can remain a shareholder here and abandon the competing restaurant. You can't ethically do both. The room fell silent as everyone awaited his response. My father looked around the table, then at me, his expression a mixture of fury and something else, perhaps a grudging respect. I'll sell, he finally said. Name your price. Leonard and I had anticipated this moment. We had already calculated a fair offer based on the restaurant's current valuation. Market value as of today's date, I replied. Leonard has the paperwork prepared if you're ready to proceed. My father studied me for a long moment. You planned this all along, didn't you? Forced me into a corner where I had no choice but to sell to you. I learned from the best, I said simply. You always taught me to think several moves ahead. For the first time since this began, a hint of a smile crossed my father's face. So I did. After the meeting, as the board members departed, my father lingered. We stood in the empty dining room, the lunch service having concluded. You're making a mistake, you know, he said, his tone less hostile than before. Running a restaurant is a thankless job. Long hours, thin margins, constant problems. I know what I'm getting into. He shook his head. I don't think you do. But you will. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, the food was good. Better than it was under Marco. Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. Elena is talented, I acknowledged. She just needed a chance to show it. Like you? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes. Like me. He nodded slowly. We'll see how long that lasts when Russo's opens. The restaurant business is brutal, Sophia. Only the strongest survive. I'm stronger than you think, Dad. Perhaps you are. He extended his hand formally. Good luck, Ms. Russo. You're going to need it. I shook his hand. Goodbye, Dad. As he walked away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction at having prevailed, sadness at the broken relationship, and determination to prove that I could succeed where he believed I would fail. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the center of Bellini's dining room, watching as the staff prepared for a special event. The restaurant had been transformed, not just physically with subtle but effective renovations, but in spirit as well. The energy was different, vibrant, cohesive, passionate. Everything's ready, Elena said, approaching in her pristine chef's whites. She had accepted the permanent executive chef position 3 months ago, after her interim period proved she was more than capable of leading the kitchen. The private dining room? I asked. Set up exactly as you requested. Thomas is handling the final details now. I nodded, checking my watch. Guests will start arriving in an hour. Is the menu finalized? Elena smiled. Yes, and it's spectacular if I do say so myself. A perfect showcase of how far we've come. And we had come far. In the 6 months since I'd taken full ownership of Bellini's, we'd accomplished what many in the industry had deemed impossible. Despite the opening of Russo's just 3 blocks away, with its celebrity chef and my father's considerable resources behind it, Bellini's had not only survived but thrived. Our revenue had increased by 45%. We'd been featured in local and national food publications. We'd received a prestigious regional restaurant award. And most importantly, we'd built a loyal customer base that chose us not because of fancy gimmicks or celebrity names, but because of consistently excellent food and service. Any word from your father? Elena asked carefully. Not directly, I replied, but I hear Russo's is struggling. Turns out Marco's ego doesn't translate to good business management. Elena wasn't surprised. Running a restaurant takes more than knowing how to cook. It takes understanding people, both customers and staff. A lesson my father never quite learned, I noted. My phone buzzed with a text from Leonard. En route. ETA 15 minutes. All confirmed. Tonight was more than just another dinner service. It was a celebration. the official launch of Bellini's new seasonal menu, and the announcement of our expansion plans. We'd be opening a second location across town in the spring, with Elena developing both menus and training a new executive chef for the new restaurant. The guest list included food critics, local business leaders, and most importantly, every investor who had believed in my vision 6 months ago. Leonard had been instrumental in securing additional funding for our expansion, convincing the board that my management style and business acumen warranted their continued support. As staff bustled around making final preparations, Zoe arrived in a cocktail dress, a far cry from her usual nurse's scrubs. "Look at this place," she exclaimed, embracing me. "It's magnificent. And so are you." She stepped back to admire my tailored burgundy suit. "CEO chic suits you. Thanks for being here tonight," I said sincerely. "I couldn't have done any of this without your support." "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss your victory lap for anything." She lowered her voice. "Is it true what I heard? About your father?" I nodded. "Leonard confirmed it this morning. Russo's is closing at the end of the month. Apparently Marco's been running it into the ground with his extravagant spending and poor management. And your father? Cutting his losses. According to Leonard, he's selling the property." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Any chance you'll buy it? That would be the ultimate power move." I laughed. "Tempting, but no. We're focusing on our new location. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about building something sustainable." As guests began to arrive, I took my place by the entrance, greeting each one personally. Leonard arrived with Patricia Menendez and James Whitaker, the shareholders who had first sold to me and made all this possible. "Sophia," Patricia said warmly, "the place looks wonderful, and I've been hearing excellent things about your financial reports." "The best investment I've made in years," James added. Leonard smiled proudly. "What did I tell you? Sophia was always meant for this." As the night progressed, I moved between tables, ensuring every guest felt welcomed and valued. The new menu items were receiving enthusiastic praise, Elena's culinary creativity shining through each dish. Near the end of the evening, as desserts were being served, Thomas approached me discreetly. "There's someone at the door asking to see you. He doesn't have an invitation." "Who is it?" Thomas hesitated. "Your father." My heart skipped a beat. "Show him to my office." "I'll be there in a moment." I found my father standing by the window in my office, looking out at the packed dining room. He turned as I entered, his expression unreadable. "I heard you were having an event," he said. "Thought I'd see what all the fuss was about." "I'm surprised you came," I replied honestly, "especially given the circumstances with Russo's." He waved his hand dismissively. "Restaurants come and go. Marco wasn't cut out for the business side of things. And yet you bet on him over me." My father sighed, suddenly looking older than his years. A mistake, as it turns out. Coming from him, this was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. "Your place is doing well," he continued. "The new menu is creative. Staff seems happy. Customers too. We're opening a second location next year," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. He nodded slowly. "Ambitious. But you were always that." An awkward silence fell between us. There was so much unsaid. Years of dismissal and underestimation on his part, resentment and determination on mine. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought you something. Congratulatory gift, I suppose." Surprised, I accepted it. Inside was a small worn leather-bound book. I recognized it immediately. My father's original business plan for Bellini's, written in his meticulous handwriting over 30 years ago. "Dad, you've earned the right to have it," he said gruffly. "You've proven me wrong, Sophia. About a lot of things." I ran my fingers over the worn cover, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. There's something else." He pulled out an envelope and placed it on my desk. "An offer. For Russo's. I know you said you're not interested in the property, but, well, it's yours if you want it. At a fair price." I stared at the envelope, understanding the significance of what he was offering. Not just a building, but an acknowledgement of my capabilities. "I'll consider it," I said carefully. He nodded, then extended his hand. "Congratulations, Sophia. You've built something impressive here. As we shook hands, I realized something had shifted between us. The approval I'd sought for so long no longer seemed as important as it once had. I'd proven myself to him, yes, but more importantly to myself. You should join us, I offered, for dessert and the announcement about our expansion. He seemed genuinely taken aback by the invitation. You sure about that? Might be awkward given our history. It's a night for new beginnings, I said. Besides, who better to witness Bellini's next chapter than the person who started it all? A small smile crossed his face, perhaps the first genuine one I'd seen in years. Lead the way, CEO. As we walked back into the dining room, conversation momentarily hushed as people recognized my father. I guided him to the main table where Leonard, Patricia, and the other investors sat. Leonard raised an eyebrow but smoothly made room for my father. Vincent. Unexpected pleasure. Leonard. My father nodded coolly. When everyone was seated, I took my place at the head of the table, champagne glass in hand. As I prepared to announce our expansion plans, I caught sight of the staff watching proudly from various positions around the room. Elena from the kitchen doorway, Thomas by the bar, Maria and the other servers lined up along the wall. These were the people who had believed in me when I was just a waitress. The ones who had seen my potential before anyone else. They were as much a part of Bellini's success as I was. I raised my glass. To Bellini's past, present, and future. And to the truth that what we become is determined not by what others say we can be, but by what we know we are capable of becoming. As glasses clinked around the room, I met my father's gaze. For the first time, he was looking at me not as his daughter the waitress, but as Sophia Russo, CEO. And in that moment, I knew that the girl who had once frozen in humiliation as her father dismissed her dreams had become exactly who she was meant to be. Not in spite of his doubt, but because she had refused to let it define her. The restaurant that had once been the setting of my greatest humiliation had become the stage for my ultimate vindication. And the story was just beginning.